Okay, thanks for joining us today. Today we are doing an unboxing of a bunch of M.2 drives. We ordered these because we're going to update our hard drives and put it in a RAID 1 configuration because we need faster processing, especially when it comes to our video rendering. So today we're going to do an unboxing and we'll see what comes in the box. So let's get started. Typical box. Ordered these from Amazon. Okay, so if you're like me, you probably already have a running computer. And as you can see, my computer is already running, and well, last thing I want to do is have to tear a ton of wires. As you can see, I'm fully packed with a ton of wires, cables and everything else, and rip it all out just to install new drives. So what we're going to do, and yeah, I know some people will be like, wow, you got a lot of junk, but I'm also working from home, so because of that, I have a lot of lab equipment and everything else for what I do. So what we're going to do is do this very carefully. Now, like I always recommend when it comes to working inside the computer, always make sure you ground yourself. Grounding is key, okay? So let's start. First and foremost, assuming that we have all our data backed up, we're going to, of course, shut down the computer. That's a good place to start. All right, now we're off. Okay, in this particular case, we undo these screws. So before you go reaching into your computer case, I recommend you ground yourself. Now, either get anti-static gloves or ground yourself by other means, whether it be a grounding strap, or in my case, how long I've been doing this, I just make sure that I'm grounded before I start playing around and not do anything that's going to generate any sort of static. Call me a risk taker. It's a good idea to have a can of air, because no matter how much you think your case is actually sealed, there's always going to be dust that's going to get into it. So give it a good spray before you start working in it. Okay. Now, as you can see, based on everything that's in here, you can't even see the bays for where we're going to put the M.2s. You can see one near the bottom here, right back there, but you know, we can't really work within that. So we're going to have to remove the video card. Once we remove the video card, then we have areas to work with. Now, other than grounding, I recommend a few things. One, make sure your computer's kind of on a stable footing. Second of all, I would recommend disconnecting the power from the back of the computer. So simply go to the back, go from the other side, and pull the power plug. Okay, so power is disconnected. If you have a static bag, I recommend you keeping it around so you can put parts safely out of harm's way, like in this particular case, our video card. Okay, make sure you can work somewhat on unobstructed Now, some people might argue, you know what? Take the extra time. Just unplug everything. Do yourself a favor. Better to be safe than sorry. No, I like a challenge. And I've kind of been doing this for 25 years. I've learned a thing or two. Now, in this particular case, I could actually use these thumb screws because they're technically thumb screws. I guess I could always undo these, but I put them in pretty good, so. Okay, the card's unscrewed. Hold it in there a bit. Unplug the power, making sure to press down the lock. In this particular case, we have two pieces, right? And then, of course, wiggle it. Now, in most cases, they will have a locking mechanism. Which, if it's not coming out, you have to maneuver in there to get your hands on. On some motherboards, it is tricky to get in there and actually unlock that. So don't put a lot of pressure at pulling the card out. Kind of push the card in. It'll soften that button a bit. I'm just going to show you here. So now they're actually removed. Make sure you're still grounded. And take the video card out. Now keep in mind, some video cards are heavier than others, so make sure to get a good grip. Okay, now we're cooking. As you can see, get a better idea of where the M.2 located. Okay, so we have one bank here, one bank here. So we're going to start with, of course, in this particular case, taking off the actual heatsink. Now, here's the thing. You probably have to have smaller tools because they're smaller screws. It's not a good idea to jam that into your CPU, but I figured, why not? Let's try something different. And make sure you keep track of all your screws too, because you really don't want one of those ending up somewhere that can zap stuff. Okay, undo that screw. It simply slides right out. And there we go, we have our other one. So I'm just going to get in here to give you a better idea of the slots. Okay. A little bit of light on the situation here. Now, on this particular motherboard, as you can see, one per. Definitely dealing with two M.2 slots, not four. I was going to say, stacking the four would have been dangerous. I was trying to figure out how the hell could that possibly be. Now that I know it's not the case. All right. So what are we looking at here? All right. So here is our first M.2 bay. This is one we're going to be working with right now. So I guess the question being here is the size factor, right? Get a rough idea, just in the case of how far this is going. So if there's the slot, it's not going all the distance. It's going to about the second one. Fair to say? Yeah. Okay. So going through the motherboard box and all the screws and connections and everything else that came with it, I have discovered a second one like this. It actually has a workable slot. Now, based on the size that I'm dealing with here, when it comes to these M.5s, because of the size of them, right? And what we've just discovered, of course, where they're going. By comparison to the one below there, it's only going to be hitting that the 80. So since it's going to be hitting the 80 only, and we will just use the extra one that comes with it. And a good idea to test whether or not they're snug is, can you loosen them with your hands? Nope. If you can't loosen them with your hands, you're good to go. Okay, the movement of truth. So open up your casing where the actual new M.2 drive is located. Take it out of the packaging. Try to avoid touching the contacts. You know, try to avoid touching those. Always a good idea to avoid touching those. So I'm going to do the bottom one first, just to give you a better idea. So they are slotted to match that slot that you actually see on the end of it, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to put it in there. It goes in at an angle. Okay. And you're going to see, in order to make some contact, it pushes down, right? Now, if you were to look at this from another angle, right? Look at it from this angle here. Of course, this is where my confusion was earlier. Is there another? No, there's no other place to go here. There's no other place. Yeah. Some would argue, well, it looks like it's long enough. No, there's no other way to go. Those are just connection wires, and they come to this contact point right here. There's your slot. There's your slot. See? That little slot is there. There's your slot. Boom. And then you're good. Lay it down. And then, of course, you put your screw in. So, put this back here. Sometimes I think you gotta have really small hands in order to do all this. Look how small that is. So, you're maneuvering with one hand. You're putting that there. Put screw in hole. Bam. Bob's your uncle. That's done. There's one. Now, the other one's not going to be as easy. I'm going to go see whether or not the box actually has another one of the screwable ones. Okay, well, unless you happen to have one of these, it actually has a Phillips screw head on it. The other one in this particular case has this. Wonderful. So unless you're lucky enough to actually have an end like this in your toolkit, in this particular case, what are we looking at here? 532. Okay, well, I was fortunate enough to have one here. So now we're going to install the primary, which, you know, can do things a little reversed here, but that's what we're doing. Okay, so we've done the first one. Well, technically the second one, but call it the first one. Let's put in the bay one. Moving forward with this. So the same as before. Basically what you're looking at is feel around, put it in the slot. There we go. Okay, make sure it's good in there. And then you are going to screw this one down. Now I know there's a heat sink we took off earlier, but first we're going to put this one in and then deal with the heat sink. Okay. Okay, so we're going to be looking at, of course, putting this in the 80. Get that in there. And then we're going to need a flathead screwdriver. Just to make sure it is snug in there. Snug. You don't want to sit there and crank it. As long as it's, you know, you can't undo it with your fingers, you should be good. Okay. Now moving forward. Take your M.2 drive, or M.2. People want to be specific. Put it in at a 30-degree angle. Let me just turn this around so you can see a little better. All right, 30-degree angle. As you can see, it is going to, you know, pop up from the board just a bit. You're looking to put it in there. All right. You want to make sure that whenever you put this on, make sure that when you put this on that you want it to sit on the actual M.2. So we're pushing it down, definitely having contact. The question is that looks like there's a little bit of a gap. Now originally this did come with a little standoff thing. This thing here. I don't know if you can see that very well. Let me just hold it this way. Which we took off at the beginning. Oh, that's a really good view of it. Anyways. So we're going to put this back on because you see this end? This and this fit nicely together. Let's back up a bit. This and this fit nicely together. So, see? So we're going to want to put that back on. Don't forget to take off the protective coating. And the question being here is that actually sitting on top of the M5, M2, sorry, on top of the drive. Looks pretty good. All the way along looks pretty good. Looks like it's sitting on top of it. So that's good. Like always, make it snug, but you don't have to like fully do it, right? If you run your finger over the top portion, you can see whether or not you have a gap. We don't have a gap. We're good. Seems to be sitting on there nicely. Excellent. Now, we ran into an issue where we don't have a screw for the bottom portion, which I'm not sure if it came with it. It came with a standoff, but you can't seem to locate the screw. So once we locate a solution for that, we will continue. Okay, so funny enough, I didn't have another screw for my M.2 drive. So as you can see, I ransacked all my tools and everything else and went through a bunch of bits from my computer building days, and I tried standoffs and I figured, okay, they're gonna work, but too thick, too long, everything else. So interestingly enough, I go and start tearing apart a lot of my electronics. So I come in, try a bunch of different electronics, take things apart. Interestingly enough, I stare over one of my old computers and I got a video card on top of it. And I look at it and I'm like, I want to see the construction of it. And there's little screws. I'm like, well, why not? We've tried 1,000,001 other screws. And oddly enough, coincidentally, look, it's Gigabyte. Same manufacturer of the board. And this is like a GTX 450 video card. So, interestingly enough, we go over here. Here is said screw from that video card. As you can see, boom, boom. Oh, the irony. And here's the thing. I'm pulling on it, nothing. So, if, for some reason, pulling on it, nothing. So if for some reason you lose that screw or don't have a secondary screw for your M.2 standoff, try taking screws out of other electronics. It's a flat end, remember, it's not like that little tip on it, but it's difficult finding the one that actually fits. This particular case, it fit. Thankfully, because otherwise I was going to get creative, and another possible solution was going to be using an old, well, it looks like a regular standoff, but believe it or not, it's not really a standoff. This comes from, of course, your video ports. But I've found it useful in different applications. I'll give you an idea of where that comes from. This comes from these things. I figured that might be a good solution. The problem is that they're too thick for the hole. All right, here we go. We're going to continue. Oops. Damn, lights had to go. Okay, so there was a good portion of time taken up trying to find the right connections. But now that we have, let's continue, shall we? Okay. So, as you know, we already fit the first one in. Now we're going to fit the second one in. So, make sure you're grounded. Make sure everything's good. Insert in. Make sure you have a solid hand for this. Remember, only enough that it's snug. I went a little too much on that, but as long as I can't undo it with my hand, I'm good. Now, take your second M.2 drive, put it in. Remember, a 30-degree angle into the slot. And it pushes down and good to go. Okay, let's get our long sought-after screw. Make sure she's centered. Yeah, dropping outside of the computer case, that's fine. Dropping in the computer case, not so much. All right, we'll look into a heatsink for that eventually. But as you can see, it's solidly in there, centered. This one's good. We checked for the gap, no gap at the top. So that's sitting flush. It's in there, it's in there, it's good. Now, you could, before you plug anything in, hit the power, see what happens. Not saying that's going to be a bad idea, just to get an idea where things are at. Fortunately, we don't have any. So I'm going to say that they are solidly in there. So I think we're good. We're going to just do a post test. Make sure she posts. And get ready, of course, in case there's any problems. All right. The next thing I'm going to do, I wish I did it first. Disconnect the drives we have connected. To avoid any data loss while we get things set up. So there we go. Get those in order too. Excellent. Okay. Now, well, a little warm even with a short period, but let's go again. So far, so good. She does get a little warm, man. Crazy enough. So, probably be looking into a heatsink for that. God, this thing must weigh like a pound. Easily. So line up slot. have a back and forth motion until we are snapped in, which we are now snapped in. All right, so you know you're good if you have everything in there flush, locked in. Believe it or not, that is locked in. The drive looks good. This is pushed all the way back. This is flush over here. And of course, right here. There's just enough clearance. Nothing's touched, nothing. You're good to go. Okay, start the computer up, start tapping that delete key, or whatever key you use to get into your BIOS. All right, in the BIOS, now we're gonna start looking for where things are at. System info. Let's go down to plug-in devices. And as we can see, success right there. Boom. Recognizes both our drives. Bob's your uncle. Everything's good. So we know they've been inserted. We know that they're functional. And now we just move on to the next stage. That's it.